Now to that ABC News exclusive. Bill Cosby responding to questions about allegations of sexual assault for the very first time. The actor and comedian is in Alabama, where he is spreading his message of education, preparing to speak with students later today. ABC's Lindsay Davis caught
For
up
a
with
whole
him
generation, this was the American family. The Cosby Show wasn't just another sitcom, it was a cultural force of nature. From 1984 to 1992, the Huxtable family welcomed us into their Brooklyn brownstone, showing us a kind of family life that was warm, hilarious, and something to aspire to. It was a show that shattered racial barriers by presenting an upper-middle-class African-American family with a successful doctor for a dad and a high-powered lawyer for a mom. It was a ratings juggernaut, pretty much single-handedly reviving the sitcom and making NBC the biggest network on television. Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable, with his iconic sweaters and gentle, fatherly advice, became America's dad. The show's influence was massive. It shaped fashion, family ideals, and the entire TV landscape for years. It felt like nothing could touch it. That's why today, when we're all constantly scrolling and re-examining the past, everyone is searching for the one scene. The single, infamous moment that got the show yanked off the air. You've probably seen the Google searches: Cosby Show scene cancelled, what episode got Cosby pulled, problematic Cosby moments. We've been trained to hunt for a single, obvious mistake, a clip that, looking back, shows the fatal flaw. We look for the on-screen clue that explains the downfall. But here's the honest truth: that scene doesn't exist. The show wasn't cancelled because of a controversial episode or a bad joke. It wrapped up its celebrated run in 1992 with a finale that was planned all along. The real story, the reason the reruns vanished and the whole legacy is now so toxic, is far more chilling. It didn't happen on a soundstage. It started with a secret, not a script. A secret that had been buried for decades, until a single joke brought a 30-year nightmare crashing into the light. To understand why everyone's looking for a phantom scene, you have to remember the world The Cosby Show built. For 8 seasons and 201 episodes, the show was the definition of wholesome TV. Cliff and Claire Huxtable ran a household filled with problems we could all relate to: kids struggling with school, dating drama, and the sweet chaos of a big family. The laughs came from everyday life, from Cliff's over-the-top reactions to his kids' shenanigans to Claire's sharp, classy parenting. It was a formula that connected with audiences everywhere. For 5 straight seasons, it was the #1 show in America, a feat that's basically impossible in today's splintered media world. Its cultural impact was huge. It presented a vision of black success and stability that was revolutionary for primetime TV. It didn't fight stereotypes with big speeches, it fought them just by existing, by showing a world where a black family was defined by love, success, and their own funny quirks, not by racial struggle. This was inspiring, and it gave viewers of all races a model for family life. The show's success opened the door for other series with mostly black casts, like A Different World and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and completely changed how networks thought about television. So, when the empire started to crumble years later, it's no surprise that people looked for an answer inside the show itself. We've all become internet detectives, digging through old media to find the moments that didn't age well. We hunt for the off-color joke or the insensitive storyline that would cause a Twitter firestorm today. It's a way to make sense of a really disturbing reality by finding a simple, easy-to-blame cause. People just assumed there had to be a moment on screen that hinted at the darkness off-screen, a mask-off moment where the beloved TV dad did or said something that got the show pulled, but that moment never happened. The Cosby Show ended its run in April 1992, not because of controversy, but because the story was over. The finale, all about Theo Huxtable graduating from college, was a touching and celebratory end to a TV era. Reruns immediately went into syndication and aired for more than 2 decades, cementing the show's place in our culture. The problem wasn't what was in the episodes. The problem was the man whose name was in the title. The truth wasn't hidden in the scripts, it was buried in court documents and in the quiet, disbelieved stories of dozens of women that went back decades. Long before the scandal blew up in 2014, there were whispers. There were embers glowing in the dark, stories that would pop up for a second before being shot down, ignored, or settled into silence. The timeline of accusations against Bill Cosby doesn't start in the 2000s, it goes all the way back to when he first got famous. The first public allegation dates back to the mid-1960s. But for decades, Cosby's public image, the friendly, Jell-O pudding pop-selling, moral compass of America, was an iron shield. The first major crack in that shield showed up in 2005. A woman named Andrea Constand, who worked for the women's basketball team at Temple University, filed a civil lawsuit against him. Constand claimed that in January 2004, Cosby invited her to his home, gave her 3 blue pills that made her dizzy and barely conscious, and then sexually assaulted her. She first went to the police a year after it happened, and they referred the case to authorities in Pennsylvania. At the time, the local district attorney, Bruce Castor, looked into it but decided not to file criminal charges. He said there wasn't enough credible and admissible evidence and believed a conviction would be impossible to get. Frustrated, Constand filed her civil suit in March 2005. Her lawsuit became a magnet for other accusers. Court documents showed that her lawyers had a list of 13 Jane Does women who were ready to testify that Cosby had done something similar to them. A few of these women went public. Tamara Green went on the Today Show to say Cosby drugged and groped her in the 1970s. Another woman, Beth Ferrier, told a newspaper that Cosby had assaulted her in the 1980s. The story was out there. It was public. But in the mid-2000s, it just didn't catch fire. Cosby was still a beloved icon, and his legal team was powerful. He denied everything. In November 2006, Cosby settled the lawsuit with Andrea Constand for a secret amount, which we later found out was almost $3.4 million. As part of the deal, Constand signed a confidentiality agreement. The case, and the other women's stories, just faded away. The whispers were silenced, but inside the sealed court file for that case was a ticking time bomb. During a deposition, Cosby was questioned under oath for 4 days. He admitted to some stunning things. He admitted to getting prescriptions for Quaaludes, a strong sedative, specifically to give to young women he wanted to have sex with. He acknowledged this was illegal. He talked about his encounter with Andrea Constand, saying it was consensual, but admitted he gave her Benadryl first. For almost 10 years, these sworn statements stayed locked away, hidden from the world. The settlements and NDAs had worked. Cosby went on with his career, still performing and positioning himself as a public moralist, even giving speeches scolding the black community for its supposed flaws. The gap between the man preaching about morality and what he was doing in private, as detailed in that deposition, was just shocking. The world had moved on, but the truth was just waiting for a spark. And in 2014, it got one, not from a reporter or a prosecutor, but from another comedian on a small stage in Philadelphia, October 16, 2014. A comedy club in Philadelphia. The same city where Bill Cosby built his career. Comedian Hannibal Buress was on stage, working on a bit about Cosby's public image, his habit of giving preachy, pull-your-pants-up speeches. In his usual chill style, Buress started picking that image apart. Bill Cosby has the FNG smuggest old black man public persona that I hate, he said. Pull your pants up, black people. I was on TV in the 80s. I can talk down to you because I had a successful sitcom. The crowd laughed. They knew the type. But then, Buress dropped the line that changed everything. Yeah, but you raped women, Bill Cosby. So, brings you down a couple notches. The whole vibe in the room shifted. You could hear gasps and nervous laughs. Buress kept going, knowing that a lot of people in the room had no idea about this buried history. "I've done this bit on stage, and people think I'm making it up," he said. "When you leave here, Google Bill Cosby rape. That shit has more results than Hannibal Buress. Any other night, in any other time, that joke might have just died in that room." But a reporter from Philadelphia Magazine was there, recording on his phone. He posted the clip online. And in the social media world of 2014, it exploded. So why did this blow up when the news reports from a decade earlier went nowhere? It was a perfect storm of timing, technology, and a culture that was finally ready to listen. By 2014, Twitter and YouTube had become massive amplifiers that could turn a small local moment into a global conversation overnight. A grainy cell phone video could have more impact than a dozen newspaper articles from 2005. And who was saying it mattered, too? Hannibal Buress wasn't a lawyer or an alleged victim. He was a peer, another comedian, and a black man, which made his takedown of Cosby's moral high ground hit differently. He wasn't just accusing Cosby of a crime, he was puncturing the myth, calling out the hypocrisy in a way that was raw, funny, and you just couldn't ignore it. As one of Cosby's accusers, Barbara Bowman, later wrote, "Only when a male comedian called Cosby a rapist did the accusation take hold." The joke was a call to action. Thousands, then millions, followed his command to Google Bill Cosby rape. They found the old stories from 2005. They found the names, Andrea Constand, Tamara Green, Beth Ferrier. The internet didn't just rediscover the old allegations, it gave them a new platform and a new power. This time, the whispers wouldn't be silenced. This time, they became a roar. Hannibal Buress's joke didn't create the story, but it blew the floodgates wide open. In the weeks and months after, the trickle of accusations from 2005 turned into a tidal wave. Feeling empowered by the new attention and the sense that they might actually be believed this time, women who had been silent for decades started speaking out. In the end, more than 60 women would come forward, telling stories that were chillingly similar, spanning from the mid-1960s to 2008. They were aspiring actresses, models, waitresses, journalists, all kinds of women. And their stories painted a deeply disturbing and consistent picture. The pattern was often the same: Cosby would act like a mentor, offering career advice. Then, he would allegedly give them a drink or a pill, saying it was for a cold or to help them relax, which would leave them disoriented and unable to resist as he assaulted them. Two of the biggest names to come forward were supermodels Janice Dickinson and Beverly Johnson. In November 2014, Dickinson gave a horrifying interview alleging that in 1982, Cosby had drugged and raped her in Lake Tahoe. A month later, Beverly Johnson, the first black woman on the cover of Vogue, wrote an essay for Vanity Fair describing how Cosby drugged her cappuccino during a meeting at his home in the mid-80s. She said she knew she'd been drugged, cursed him out, and he dragged her into a taxi. The sheer number of stories was overwhelming. Cosby's carefully built image as America's dad was being torn apart with every new headline. The fallout was fast and brutal. NBC, which was developing a new sitcom for him, killed the project. Netflix postponed a stand-up special. And, most symbolically, the networks that had been airing Cosby Show reruns for decades started pulling it from their schedules. TV Land was one of the first, in November 2014, and others quickly followed. The show, once a TV staple, began to vanish. Considered too toxic to air, the public was now forced to see the man behind the myth. The biggest hit to Cosby's defense came in July 2015. After a legal fight from the Associated Press, a judge ordered the documents from Andrea Constand's 2005 lawsuit to be unsealed. Now the whole world could read Cosby's own words from his deposition. They read his admission of getting quaaludes to give to women he wanted to have sex with. While Cosby claimed it was all consensual, admitting he used powerful drugs as a tool of seduction was a bombshell. It basically confirmed the core of what his accusers had been saying all along. The time for whispers was over. The time for a criminal trial had finally come, with Cosby's 2005 deposition now public and a new D.A. in office. The criminal case was reopened. On December 30, 2015, just days before the 12-year statute of limitations ran out, Bill Cosby was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of aggravated indecent assault against Andrea Constand. It was the only case out of dozens of allegations that could still be criminally prosecuted. The first trial started in June 2017. The prosecution's case was built around Andrea Constand's testimony. To show this was a pattern, they were also allowed to call one other accuser to the stand. Cosby's defense team attacked Constand's credibility, trying to paint her as a liar. After 6 days and more than 52 hours of deliberation, the jury was hopelessly deadlocked. The judge had to declare a mistrial. For Cosby's supporters, it felt like a win. For his accusers, it was crushing. But the prosecutors immediately said they would retry the case. The second trial began in April 2018, and this time was different. The judge made a game-changing decision. He allowed the prosecution to call 5 additional accusers to testify, not just one. Now, the jury heard from a line of women, including Janice Dickinson, who all told their stories. Their testimonies echoed each other, creating a powerful picture of a serial predator. The defense stuck to their strategy: call Andrea Constand a greedy liar who was just in it for the money. This time, it worked. On April 26, 2018, the jury found Bill Cosby guilty on all 3 counts. The man once known as America's Dad was now a convicted felon. In the courtroom, after the verdict was read, Cosby became enraged, shouting at the prosecutor, "He doesn't have a plane, you asshole." On September 25, 2018, he was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison and labeled a sexually violent predator. The verdict was celebrated as a landmark moment for the #MeToo movement. It seemed like the legal battle was finally over. But in a case full of twists, the biggest one was still to come. For nearly 3 years, Bill Cosby was inmate number NN 7687 in a maximum security prison. He said he'd serve the full 10 years rather than ever show remorse. Then, on June 30, 2021, the news shocked everyone: the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had overturned his conviction. He was being released from prison, effective immediately. To be clear, this was not an exoneration. The court didn't say he was innocent. Instead, the conviction was thrown out on a legal technicality, a violation of Cosby's rights. The issue went all the way back to 2005 and the original DA, Bruce Castor. Castor, believing he couldn't win a criminal case, had publicly announced he would not prosecute Cosby. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that this public statement was effectively a non-prosecution agreement. They argued that because of this promise, Cosby felt safe to testify in Andrea Constand's civil lawsuit without pleading the Fifth. That deposition was what ultimately incriminated him. The court said using it against him in a criminal trial years later was fundamentally unfair. Their decision was absolute. Not only was the conviction overturned, but they also barred any future prosecution for this specific crime. He walked free. The reaction was shock and fury. Survivors and their advocates felt betrayed. Andrea Constand called the decision disappointing. Felicia Rashad, who played Claire Huxtable, tweeted her support, saying, "A terrible wrong is being righted." She faced a massive backlash for her comments. This final twist cemented the impossibly messy legacy of The Cosby Show. The show itself was never the issue, but it's now permanently tangled up with the actions of its star. Reruns are still hard to find. While it might be on some streaming services, major networks keep their distance. The show's own producer, Tom Werner, admitted years ago that the legacy is tarnished. So how do we even process this? How do you separate the groundbreaking, positive show from the horrific reality of the man who created it. Can you separate the art from the artist? For many, especially the survivors, the answer is a hard no. The image of the warm, gentle Dr. Huxtable is now just a grotesque mask. For others, the show's importance to television history and black representation is a fact, no matter how uncomfortable it is to admit now that in the end, there wasn't one single, infamous scene that took the Cosby Show off the air. The search for one was always a search for a simple answer to a horribly complex problem. We look for a crack in the facade, a moment on camera that explains the monster, because the alternative, that there was no on-camera hint at all, is much harder to face. The truth is the show itself was a near-perfect facade. It was a beautiful, well-crafted vision of family and decency that had nothing to do